Alrighty. Well, good morning and a good evening to you folks. I think we have 12 folks in the room so far. We'll let it fill up a little bit more. I'm Troy Woodson, Director of Acquisitions over at Feedbackly, and greetings from my living room. I guess coming from Finland, I have a yellow background because here it gets dark around 3 o'clock these days. So we want to welcome everybody that's here so far. And we have our Director of Marketing, Evely, and we have our CEO, Jaakko Männistö, who, by the way, is an award-winning CX professional and writer, in addition to being CEO as his day job. So we want to give you all a hearty welcome today. Now, today's program, we're going to be looking at the 7 steps on how to build a successful CX program. And it's sponsored by Feedbackly, CarePage, and CX Forum. And at Feedbackly, we're helping you understand your customers so that you can really turn that intelligence into growth automatically. And today, Jaakko is going to be sharing, really the 7 steps on how to create a successful CX program. And that said, when you look at Feedbackly's Experience Suite offering, what we do provide is a comprehensive suite where you're able to look at your customer experience from an easy-to-use tool, which helps you gather customer feedback across the entire customer journey. And we also supplement that with an EX offering because CX is not as robust unless you also have a comprehensive EX program to go with it. That said, we also provide high touch in the form of digital trainings. And Feedbackly, we've been working with industry leaders for years. Some well-known brands you may know, 7-Eleven, PepsiCo, Prisma here in Finland, and many, many more. Now, the word is out that our customers are as thrilled as we are with regard to CX. CX, as we know, is becoming something that's more important, particularly as we have the pandemic on the rise, where it's more important than ever to gather customer feedback and be able to take action on that feedback across the entire customer journey. We're highly regarded in Trustpilot, Google, and Capterra, and more. Now, some general housekeeping that I'd like to actually go over is that Jaakko will start in a second, don't worry. But please write your questions down in the questions section, and then they'll be taken care of at the end. Now, please notice that this is a webinar, and it's also being recorded, and it's going to be shared with everyone afterward. And if you're nice, and only if you're nice, we might have a very special free offer for you. But without further ado, I'd like to pass the baton to Jaakko Männistö.
Thank you, Troy.
Here we go. That was great.
I would be happy to take over. There you go. And also welcome from my side. Happy to see all of you here. People are coming in as we speak. So I think it's good to get going. Also being being considerate of time. We have more than 150 participants joining today or registered for the webinar. So that is an awesome number. What I will be talking today, and hopefully we can spark up a little bit of conversation around that, is essentially looking from a little bit more practical perspective how you can build a successful CX program. Of course, due to limited of time, I'm not able to give you a full picture of what actually or how actually CX programs are built. But later on, I'm just going to share you information around that. So don't worry, all of this you're going to receive and all the additional material as well. So you can also dig a little bit deeper into that subject. But basically, these are the questions what we're going to look in today. Essentially, why it is so important to have that CX program, but also it basically boils down to the fact that why customer experience is so important for your company, especially in a times like these. So then thriving from there is looking into more specifically those cultural touch points inside your company. What actually drives a successful CX program, and what are the biggest pitfalls on building and planning a successful CX program. So we can then look those, and I'm trying to keep it as practical as possible. But I'm going to start from a bigger picture and then driving down into a smaller, very, very practical, one easy to use tool that essentially I use in many CX programs, and that's basically where we usually start from. So you're going to have that essentially. But if we're looking at the current situation nowadays, and if we're talking about how markets and drivers for purchase behavior has changed since decades back, mainly what we've been talking about is products. And what we've done is that we've shifted from products to services, then to what we've been on the early 2000s. What we talked about is mainly relationships, but nowadays it's all about experiences. And you might think that why this is important. Like, of course, this is true, and I would say that if you are here in this webinar with us or watching this on video, I think you're already there. You understand that today's we live in an experience economy. So essentially, you would be ready to pay more for a good experience, or you would be ready to travel a little bit further for a good experience than before, because you have a plethora of choices where to go for. But the main point here is that experiences are more complicated. Essentially, building a good experience or a customer experience is fairly easy and simple, but people are different. So it makes experiences more complicated. Hence, it makes customer experience programs and developing those programs more complicated. So essentially, the businesses have to go for and relate a little bit differently and change a little bit differently nowadays than what we were able to do about, let's say, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we were able to sell much more one product to everyone, but nowadays it's much more about building an offering and a product or a service to that specific segment, to that specific customer. So it has changed a lot. Now, as mentioned, we came from a kind of like from a bulk to a very, very personalized things. And inside the personalization, the main point here is definitely the fact that now we need to be able to look on journeys. And with that, what I mean is that we have multiple different touch points with our customer, both in brick and mortar and digital. And basically all the businesses nowadays, if we're talking about business or if we're talking about public sector, healthcare, or even municipalities, the point is that we have a lot of different digital touch points, and we will need to be able to somehow handle all of them and understand how our customer moves through our services and what kind of customer-facing experiences we're offering to that customer. And that is the point in the entire puddle, and it has created a situation where actually it has turned customer experience from a kind of like a nice to have category to be a must have category. Essentially meaning that now if you're offering a poor customer experience, you don't even get a chance. You don't even get a chance to try on your business, because your customers are abandoning you right when they have the chance. Your acquisition cost is higher, and your customers are not returning back. So this actually creates a base for a terminology that I just love to use, and that is customer equity. And customer equity is just a so simple term, but actually really, really powerful. And what I've been, trying to do here during the past 10 years is to explain, for example, an investment banker, how we should measure or put dollar signs into good customer experience. And right after everything changed, when I started to talk about customer equity, for the first times I actually heard about customer equity when I asked this question from one of the four founders of NPS score, and he explained to me that this is a very simple term, but essentially it makes it much more understandable. So right now, for example, due to the pandemic situation, where we see that companies who have built their customer equity for a longer period of time actually are thriving now because their customers essentially want to help them and not abandon them. And maybe I would like to give a small example here. There is a coffee shop near to my house. It's a small example, but coffee house near to my house. It's run by an entrepreneur. And every time, they give me an awesome experience when I go there. They know me, and they know my specials, and they give me good service. And they actually came up with a recurring coffee service just for me because I go there that much. So I pay flat fee for my coffee, even though for everyone else it's a different thing. So basically, what happened that now. I haven't been there in that coffee shop because of the pandemic for almost 9 months, but I'm just paying the fee. I'm just paying the fee because I want that place to survive, that I can go there again after the pandemic situation. So maybe it's a small example, but it has all the elements what we want to understand here. And maybe the understanding here from a business perspective as well is that if you are a very a low customer equity company, or you hold a very low customer equity company, is that usually your salespeople, customer service, and your business and customer facing people, they tend to think that how can we make the sale today? How can we make the sale as quickly as possible, and go forward from there? And then we're done. Whereas more customer-centric companies who have higher customer equity usually tends to think, how can we make them come back, and not without sacrificing the business right now, of course. But essentially, we're not optimizing this moment, but we're optimizing the entire journey. Trying to bring them back. And if you think this way, you will be forced to think in a way that it'll bring a better experiences. So this is usually a way that also very, very business and also financial oriented people understand that of course that the customer needs to come back again and again. And essentially the customer equity equation is very easy. The longer they come and the more they spend and many more times that you give them a good experience, the higher the customer equity essentially is. And then just another point from the values and the understanding of what goes on is that actually we've noticed that companies who concentrate on customer journeys and not just one touch point experience, and essentially understands in their customer experience programs that they have multiple touch points inside their business, even though that it might seem that they only have one. Usually the point is that they have multiple, because usually they have sales, they have support, you have your website, you have your marketing, you have your newsletter, you have basically a ton of different practical touch points. And what we can see that without basically exceptions, each and every company from our portfolio, as well as who are our customers who have hard focus on customer journey, they tend to do much better, on about 20%, just by the fact that they concentrate on optimizing the entire customer journey, and they take it kind of like bit by bit going forward. Now, this is essentially my last theory approach to the matter. because we just need to understand the big picture a little bit to dive deeper into the CX programs. Now, what it actually requires to build a happy customer that essentially buys more. And why is it important to have happy customers is essentially that for the time being, when they actually buy from you, our own data actually shows that they buy 20% more, and their customer lifetime value is about 17 times higher than for the person that is not pleased with your service. And this is actually, based on the customer equity as well. It's being built through that. It's a simple equation again, and very easy to understand. And we're going to talk about the return on investment on customer experience in just a couple of minutes. But the question essentially is that what are the main building blocks, what you have to have put in place to be at least, or to at least give yourself an opportunity to be successful on this. So the first thing is that your customer needs to be heard, and it's a psychological thing for us. And the first step is always like, if I have a problem, do they actually show that they want to listen? So what the customers usually get really frustrated if they don't have a channel when they can go, and if they don't have a phone number where they can call, if they don't have a customer feedback a form or a survey or something where they can go, if they don't have an email, what they can send. They get really frustrated because then you're giving them a message that you don't want to listen to what they have to say. So they need to be heard, and you need to acknowledge that they have heard. Then the second point is that essentially you would always need to go over what you promise. It can be just a little bit. It doesn't have to be too much. As hopefully most of you guys know from the very basics of customer experience is essentially a end result when we're covering brand promises, like what kind of image the person or the customer has about your brand, and then the actual experience, what happens when you give them the service or the product. And that's the difference. So it's different for every company, and it's different for each and every people. And to understand that is also really important. So we would always need to go a little bit higher for brand promise. So there's an easy example. You wouldn't expect to have the same kind of experience from a brand new Tesla and a very much used like $1,000 car, because the expectation towards those cars are so much different. So even though that Tesla is doing well, but if you buy a $1,000 car from a car dealership and it works like crazy well and everything is good, it might actually be a better customer experience, because you are expecting it to be less. So this is also something for marketing to think, where you can actually manage your customer experiences and your expectations via brand, and that how kind of like also build your customer equity by putting effort into saying and what kind of marketing message you have. Now, but that's the point. Like consecutively, you have to go a little bit higher. You have to match that brand or go a little bit higher, because if you go lower, it'll end up as a bad customer experience. Then the third part, or number 3, which is something that I go really much like up to current if we're looking into the CX market or the other professionals on the market, because usually when we're talking about customer experience, people are not talking about euros or dollars. But essentially, to be a customer and to be a loyal customer and to be a promoter, you need to be invested in. It's a little bit same. If you get something for free, it doesn't have a value. But when you pay something for something, it has value, and you need value for that. So it means basically that when I put something in or money into a product or a service, I'm much more prone to actually promote that service forward than if I wouldn't pay anything for that service. So that's one of the reasons why free services are not getting promoted as well. And the point is where we have to target as a customer experience professionals and a customer experience programs essentially is to have some kind of goal for the customers to come back and buy again, or repeatedly buy again, or give us more money. And if we're talking about citizenship experience and a public sector, then there always should be another kind of like a goal or target from their success perspective. For businesses is to sell more. For public sector, it's something else. But there's always should be that next step from that business perspective that we want that person to take, and that's where we kind of like want to push that forward by giving the better experience. And then, of course, what we usually tend to forget is that number 4, what we're going to be talking about a little bit more today, is actually the employee experience and how that is handled. So if you're just investing into your customer, if you're just trying to see that your customer experience is designed beautifully, but the execution is not there, it is just an impossible to go forward. So just remember that your employees is the fuel for your customer experience, and everything starts from there. So basically, you can go from 4, 3, 2, 1 from a kind of like a importance order in that sense. And taking all that into consideration from the customer, from the concept of customer equity coming down to the change on the market, and also the customer journey, what we stated is that basically customer experiences are starting to be so complicated that it is absolutely impossible to understand each and every step and place on that progress or that process, because we are not able to manage the fact that if a friend tells another, that I had this sort of experience, or they might even have a wrong type of image in their head because someone else told something else, and so forth and so forth. So it gets complicated. So what we would need to look into when we're starting to go into customer experiences is that we want to try to simplify things on places where we can actually do that. And when we're looking into from a very internal perspective, now trying to find common mistakes and pain points when it comes planning on customer experience programs, these are the ones that what we face the most. And maybe we can see these as an objections, and maybe we can see these as kind of like steps that we have to overcome in our organization to be able to bring that customer experience program to be successful, and also ensuring our finance for it, also ensuring people's commitment to it, and how we can actually push that forward. Now, one of the main challenges of what I would think that is when you were going into very practical things is the complexity and difficulty in the purchasing process. That's definitely one, and maybe that's very prominent for us, and what we try to ease up as well as also because we are also a software provider, so we see that very closely. But mainly that companies don't know how to buy these kind of services. Companies are starting to understand how to buy, marketing. There's a lot of people inside who understand that part. They understand how to buy different kind of supportive services like financial services, accounting, and so forth. But how to actually buy and how to actually acquire, assets to CX programs is very difficult. Essentially, many times, most of the times, the companies are doing this the first time at this time. So that is definitely it. And when we're talking about purchase, behavior and knowledge, the second part is that usually negative experiences come from trying to outsource customer support or earlier experiences in different outsourcing problems, essentially. So they kind of like fade into on the customer experience side as well. And many times what we face is that not even when trying to sell something into or buy a software or a tool, but many times when I'm, for example, with our customers, working and building that customer experience program, without an external software, they might have an internal software. One of the biggest objections is that, but you remember, that project with, we tried to make our customer support more automated and better and so forth. That went to south. So that kind of like comes through there. So that is a sort of objection that needs to go forward. Of course, nowadays we need to be very careful on our customers' personal security and GDPR. This is a very important point. These are usually the biggest question marks when we go a little bit further down the road on trying to understand our customer better, is that do we have to know who the customer is to actually understand our customer better? Meaning that, do we have to know that it's Jaakko, or do we have to know that it's Troy to give better customer experience? And that is a very good question. And that's something that you need to try to understand in your own business. And especially now when there are a lot of new legislation coming in regarding that. Then usually the two last, from a very practical point of view, if we are working as CX professionals, building a customer experience program, is that we usually start too late, and we usually start building too big. So essentially, we're setting too long on hold. So we always need to start from something that we can comprehend, and then start building and take it step by step. And then the last one, which is one of the main things, what I see is the project does not interest, for example, a certain department that it should, and we're going to go for there basically right now. So taking those pain points into consideration and what is important for customer experience. These are basically the 7 things what we look into, and for example, what I look into in a CX program. This is not an exhaustive list, but from a focus point of view of building a very customer-oriented culture, these are the things that the person who is actually building that customer experience program need to take into consideration when trying to internally sell that program forward, for example, and trying to explain for everyone else why is this important, why we need this, and if you kind of like are able to cover these steps, or if you're able to cover these essentials, you have a much greater chance on getting everyone on board for that customer experience program. Now, again, I'm going to be sharing this later on, so no worries. You don't have to, worry about the smaller print. But if we just quickly go through all of these, usually where we start is that we try to build a customer experience vision that is easily to communicate it for your own internal, for example, your CEO, or if you're a CEO, to be also the same way communicated to your entire organization. And it needs to be something very practical, like what are the main goal of this customer experience program? How does it change? How does our day-to-day lives change when this is coming in? And if your answer is that, well, now we're collecting customer feedback and that's handled, you're you're in the wrong route. So collecting customer feedback doesn't mean that you have a customer experience program. And that's something very essential to understand. And maybe, I could give you an example of that. So a goal or a clear vision for a customer experience program, hopefully is tied into your own strategy. So if your strategy is to be a market leader in a certain industry in 5 years, in let's say, for example, Finland. So basically your customer experience vision would need to be tied to that, meaning that what is your customer experience looking like when or how you're getting to be that market leader. So it needs to be something very practical, and usually, hopefully, targeted to that, because that's something that most people will understand, and that's how it ties to the business. then when you would need to start from of course, understanding your own customer, who you're selling to, and building a good customer experience for a customer who is basically anyone is much harder than building the program for people who you know that are your customers and who you basically know that you're targeting to. So let's say if you're selling to in B2B only for automotive industry and only for marketing people inside that industry, it is much easier to create those experiences tailor-made for them than if you're a retail store, grocery store, for example. But the same goes. You need to understand who your customers are. Then, of course, creating that emotional connection and explaining what that emotional connection means also to your own employees. And this is something that is super important, because this is one of the main source of value from customer experience programs, is that everyone who is involved should understand that what kind of emotional connection you have with your customer, or if you don't have an emotional experience with your customer. There are also businesses that just absolutely don't want to create that, or is not even trying to create that. But you would need to understand that then you don't have it, because it has a huge impact on how your CX program is built and what are the goals behind it. And then, of course, number 4, this is something that collecting customer feedback and measuring your customer experience is important. But what I would like to hear to emphasize is the real-time aspect. And the real-time aspect means here that we're not talking about once a month or once a year or once a quarter. It means basically all the time. And when things happen, they happen in different places on different channels. And it is very important for you to have that information and knowledge, for example, understanding about your customer in real time. And this also helps when you are sharing that information to your own organization, is that it's happening now. It's not happening tomorrow. It didn't happen like 6 months ago, because this is also offering you more information because it's happening right away. So that real time is that key trigger here to be successful in also building that customer-centered culture, because you always have something to report to your people. Then with a quality framework, what we like to say is that you would also, at some point, you would also need to develop that team and kind of like expand their understanding. Because if you're saying customer experience, the problem with customer experience is that everybody essentially understands what customer experience is, and it needs to be good customer experience. But not too many people have a good knowledge on what it actually really means. So many times, what we usually do is we try to identify the people who, from each department, one person who is kind of like a customer experience advocate, who will be responsible for customer experience actions and customer experience programs, basically inside the entire company. So we have a leader, customer experience leader, and then we have advocates inside each department. This goes without saying, acting regularly on employee feedback. But this can be done through conversation. It doesn't have to be a feedback system, but in a bigger company, it actually helps out. And linking these two together and seeing some correlations between is super important. So that you can actually show that we made a change in employee experience and it has this sort of effect on customer experience. And having that sort of ideology in your head is really important. And then measuring that ROI and delivering those experiences and actually going forward is really important. So on each customer experience program, what we build, there's always have to be one target where we actually measure that ROI from all those actions, what we do. It can be sales. Hopefully it is sales, because that's what matters in customer experience as well. And there is a couple of ways that actually drives that sales, and I have a couple of examples right here. But driving deeper a little bit on the culture and those people. So why it is actually important to have not just a CX person, but a CX team, even though in a company where there is no only one CX person or one marketing person. What we usually say is that from those advocates, try to build a team, and that's where we usually the success comes from in CX programs as well. Demonstrate value on investing those in your people by showing them and openly showing them the CX data, what you actually collect, what are the results, what kind of changes you make. And sometimes it can be brutal, sometimes it hurts, but essentially that's really important that there's transparency through the entire organization, what the customer actually has to say about your product or service, because you can never know. The answer can come from IT, it can come from anywhere else, so that's essentially important. And then when we're talking about this ROI model, there are basically two ways of doing that, and I'm going to share some examples for you after this. But basically, there's always direct and indirect customer experience and ROI on customer experience. If indirect is essentially a little bit easier to understand, because it is, you collect that voice of customer data, you make changes to your business, and through that you're able to develop and solve those problems faster, and then grow your business through that. But the direct one is a little bit more unknown, and essentially that is by using that customer experience data is to, for example, offer better offers to your customers, or by closing the loop, and at the same time, based on their customer experience data, let's say that they were happy or unhappy, based on that data, giving them a different kind of offer. So this is a very powerful, very straightforward way of bringing customers back, and it's making it easier to. It's really easy to measure. That's, for example, what we do at Feedbackly as well. So that can actually really help if you open up that to, for example, a financial person, saying that, okay, well, at least we're going to bring in this much sales on the table, and it's going to be making it much more easier to push that CX program forward. And the last one is basically the main point here is that the struggle of connecting those departments. And here's actually one like a stupid simplified way of seeing things. This is something that we use all the time. Is that we just make a map. We just make a map of all the different departments inside a company, and map what is the value and what is the tasks inside the customer experience program, what they should be doing. So basically, from legal to IT and finance, sales to human resources, etc., there are different kind of ways of seeing customer experience and different kind of value points from customer experience to them as well. So they would like to understand different kind of things from the customer, but everybody should have the same goal of understanding the customer better to become more customer-centric company and really bringing in that experience into the heart of the company. And then you don't have to start worrying that, okay, who is driving the strategy? Because if any one of these departments is driving the strategy, basically all of them would have the customer in mind automatically. And essentially that's it. Like, now we came into a very, very tight, easy to use, and again, I'm going to share this. So from my side, what I would like to, of course, do is I'm going to throw out a holiday offer for you guys. I'm going to share after this some discount codes for you for the book and for the educational stuff that I have to offer and we have to offer. For the reason that because we see that pushing that CX knowledge higher is definitely going to have a good impact in your business. So happy to do that, and these offers are valid until the end of the year. So thanks everyone. And from my side, I'm just 5 minutes over my time. I apologize for that. But I think Troy, I think we still have time for just a couple of questions that might have come. So hopefully, we can answer those as well. All right. Troy, can you hear me here? Yes, there you go. All right. Thanks.
We got a couple of really interesting questions. The first question we have is, how would you comment on some firms pausing their CX programs and firing their CX managers during the pandemic?
Yeah, a very good question. Something that we've struggled as well a little bit as the problem there, and I can see where it's coming from, because when you invest in CX for a longer period of time, usually the first thing is that, okay, if we're taking that part out, it can stay as paused for a certain period of time without creating a huge damage to the business. Now, I've seen many examples where companies have done exactly opposite with crazy good results. And I would say that it's a little bit of same thing as trying to fire your salespeople or marketing people. When you would need to really transform and change. So on a short term, it might bring you savings for sure. Not saying that, but on a mid scale, already on midterm, it's definitely going to. I would say it will definitely bring down the potential that the business has. And this is one of the good things on if the customer experience program is really rooted to the business, is that when those people are, for example, in finance or in sales or higher management, those guys are very into it, and they have accountability for CX as well. In very fewer situations, this actually happens. And now that you asked that, inside our customer base, I actually have when there's a good customer experience program set, we haven't seen anyone being let go from the CX management perspective. So definitely there might help, but I would say that it's a very short-sighted way of seeing things. But of course, at the same time, I understand that tough situations that there might be.
Great. Another question, could you also elaborate more on the CX vision and its connection to strategy?
Sure.
Is superior customer experience specific enough?
Oh yeah, no. If we're talking about that, our customer experience is superior. No, that's not specific enough. Not by miles. Let me give you a good example. So if I use the same example that we had before on a customer experience vision, customer experience vision should be something very, very tangible. And as a guideline, I would say that it can be a number. It definitely should be a number, in a sense that when you measure something, our number is here now, it should be here. That's one way. But in the end, also, it is dictated by the business and the strategy that you're running, and what is the strategy there. So the connection should be that there should be always an easy link to it, meaning that if you want to be, again, a market leader in selling cars in Finland, then we think what kind of customer experience you would need for that, and how what are the measurements for building that customer experience. So for example, if we're thinking something very tangible, one of our customers, we took as a goal to be noted as the market leader for best customer experience in their own specific industry paper report. So that is very tangible. It's something that you cannot make happen until you make super good work with your customer, or you grow your business. So it can be some sort of outcome from outside, or when it's an internal thing. It can be even something like, we want to be as customer centric as possible. So in 3 or 4 years, to be able to be there or to be successful in our strategy, we would need to have certain things in place. Like, we would need to be able to get 500 good reviews per week, for example. And those are very tangible things. But then you would always have a link between that and your strategy, and it should always come from there. But always go for something tangible. Basically, it doesn't matter if it's a small thing or a big thing, but something tangible.
All right, great. Another question, and how relevant do you find a CX program for smaller firms with a max of, say, 10 people?
Oh, very good. I think, looking into CX programs as a framework or a guideline, it helps you. But I would never urge you, starting to set up a CX program with huge budgets and crazy allocation if you are 10 people. In a smaller perspective, CX programs means that how you can be thriving to be more customer centric. But the same things apply. And in a smaller company, that would mean that on some extent, customer experience should be on everyone's desk, at least a little bit. The same way that, in a bigger company, you would have a head of, for example, that one person inside your department should be responsible or should be that customer experience advocate. The same way, in a company where there is 10 people, maybe you can go for once a month. Maybe you can go for even once a week in your weekly meeting. What you can do is that you can take that customer experience, that feedback, that data as part of that process, and say, our customers had these sort of problems this week, and these sort of successful or good experiences. How could we do better here? And it's a very practical thing, especially in a smaller company. And then that answer can come from IT, it can come from finance, it can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to be, coming from that customer support person necessarily. So definitely, I would use the same framework, but just to understand that you just don't have a full-time person on doing that, and that one person should have the goal of pushing that customer experience to everyone's agenda, at least a little bit, so that you can be more customer centric in the future.
Fantastic. That's the end of the questions that we have for the group. And we would really like to thank everyone for participating. And as we said, we've had over 150 plus folks who have signed up. And the webinar would be available to everyone as it has been recorded. So we want to give you a hearty thanks from all of us to all of you, and also sending happy holiday wishes to each and every one of you and your families. Stay safe out there.
Thank you very much, and have a nice holidays.
Take care. Cheers.